Nephilim update. Nephilim update. Nephilim update.
It's been a while since we have an actual Nephilim update, but
I know
here
it's like
it's
almost a throwback at this point.
I know. This is spectator.co.uk, published May 8th, 2022, by Sean Thomas. I'm not going to read all of it. It's kind of a long article, but we'll get what we need to get out of it. And the headline here is an unknown, extraordinary ancient civilization buried under East Turkey? ?
What a loaded question.
Yeah, not extraterrestrial, extraordinary. This is very interesting. There are some references to adult-themed things here. Just a heads
Earmuffs.
up for some of the little kiddies. But it's not too bad. It's just a couple technical terms. I am staring at about a dozen stiff, 8-foot-high, orange-red penises, carved from living bedrock and semi-enclosed in an open chamber. A strange carved head of a man, a demon, a priest, a god, also hewn from the living rock, gazes at the phallic totems like a primitivist's gargoyle. The expression of the stone head is doleful to the point of grimacing, as if he or she or it disapproves of all this, of everything being stripped naked under the heavens and revealed to the world for the first time in 130 centuries.
Wow, that's a lot of centuries.
Yes, 130 centuries, because these penises, this peculiar chamber, this entire...
You're lucky I don't read articles that you bring to the show, Gons, because this would have never made it past the censors.
Once we get past this point, it's not really...
it's clinical. I'm just
I know,
joking,
and it relates to a theme of the obelisk and stuff. Because these things, this peculiar chamber, this entire perplexing place known as Karahan Tepe, pronounced Karahan Tepe, which is now emerging from the dusty plains of Haran in eastern Turkey, is astonishingly ancient. Put it another way, it is estimated to be 11 to 13,000 years old. This number is so large, it is hard to take in. For comparison, the Great Pyramid at Giza is 4,500 years old. Stonehenge is 5,000 years old. The Cairn de Bernennes tomb complex in Brittany, perhaps the oldest standing structure in Europe, could be up to 7,000 years old. The oldest megalithic ritual monument in the world until the Turkish discoveries was always thought to be
Gobekli Tepe.
No, that's not how you say this word.
No, I don't know. I'm in a black void.
2 G's, Antijaja, Jantija in Malta. That's maybe 5,500 years old. So, Karahan Tepe, and it's a little chamber thing here, and everything that inexplicably surrounds the chamber, shrines, cells, altars, megaliths, audience halls, et al., is vastly older than anything comparable and plumbs quite unimaginable depths of time, back before agriculture, probably back before normal pottery, right back to a time right back to a time when we once thought human civilization was simply impossible. After all, hunter and gatherers, cavemen with flint arrowheads, with regular supplies of grain without the regular meat and milk of domesticated animals, do not build temple towns with water systems, do they? Virtually all of that, what we can see of Karahan Tepe, has been skillfully unearthed the last 2 years with remarkable ease. And although there is much more to summon from the grave, what it is already teaching us is mind-stretching. Taken together with its age, complexity, sophistication, and its deep resident mysteriousness, and its many sister sites now being unearthed across the Haran Plains, collectively known as the Tas Tepler, or the Stone Hills, these carved ochre-red rocks, so silent, brooding, and watchful in the hard-whirring breezes of the semi-desert, constitute what might just be the greatest archaeological revelation in the history of humankind. The unveiling of Karahan Tepe and nearly all of the Tas Tepler in the last 2 years is not without
These
precedent.
giant stone penises belong in a museum.
As I take my urgent photos of the ominously luring head, Nekmi Karul touches my shoulder and gestures behind across the sunburnt and undulant plains. This guy, man. So he goes on and on here and talks about this thing.
Look, let me just be clear real quick for those who are just listening to the podcast. Yeah, they're big rocks, and yeah, they are taller than they are wide, but kind of seems like this guy has something.
He's got his own imagination.
Got a bit of an obsession. But as you can tell from a lot of the other language he's using to describe
he's making
this site
references. Yeah,
he has a very personal connection to this archaeological dig. Apparently,
apparently he did some
little too personal, if you ask me.
Under the pen name Tom Knox.
I'm sure he did.
I wrote an excitable thriller about the first of these stone hills, a novel called The Genesis Secret. Which is
excitable thriller? Please.
Okay, so he goes on and on here, and he talks about Gobekli Tepe and what's being unearthed there. And obviously, there's a lot of like ancient alien stuff, and a lot of focus has been there for the last few years. But here's where some interesting things are mentioned here in this article. A few weeks after that encounter, he talks about some encounter by the mulberry tree. News of the shepherds find. Excuse me. Hold on. They got. Okay, so he gets in touch with the German Archaeologist Institute in Istanbul. In late 1994, the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt came to the site of Gobekli Tepe to begin his slow, diligent excavations of its multiple, peculiar, enormous T-stones, which are generally arranged in circles like the standing stone of Avebury or Stonehenge. Unlike European standing stones, however, the older Turkish megaliths are often intricately carved with images of local fauna. Sometimes the stones depict cranes, boars, or wild fowl creatures of the hunt. There are also plenty of leopards, foxes, and vultures. Occasionally, these animals are depicted next to human heads. Notably lacking were detailed human representations, except for a few coarse or eerie figurines and the T-stones themselves, which seem to be stylized invocations of men, their arms angled to protect their groin. The obsession with the region is obvious. More so now, we have the benefit of hindsight provided by Caran Tepe and other sites. Very few representations of women have emerged from the test Templar so far. There is one obscene caricature of a woman, perhaps giving birth. Whatever inspired these temple towns, it was not a benign matriarchal culture. Quite the opposite, maybe. The apparent date of Gobekli Tepe, first erected in 10,000 BC. Sure, he used that word.
Tom Knocklesbury, or whatever your name is.
Earlier, caused a deal of skepticism, but over time, archaeological experts began to accept the significance. Ian Hodden of Stanford University declared that, quote, Gobekli Tepe changes everything. David Lewis Williams, the revered professor of archaeology at Witwatersrand University in Johannesburg, said at the time, quote, Gobekli Tepe is the most important archaeological site in the world. And yet, in the 90s and early noughties, Gobekli Tepe dodged the limelight of general public attention. It's hard to know why. Too remote? Too hard to pronounce? Too eccentric to fit with established theories of prehistory? Whatever the reason, when I flew out on a whim in 2006, inspired by 2 brisk minutes of footage on a TV show, even the locals in the nearby big city Sanliurfa had no conception of what was out there in the barrens. All right, he's just talking to the cab driver or whatever. And then
where's the Nephilim, man?
We're getting there. Hold on, man.
Oh, I got a cat on my head.
Let's see. Okay, yeah. So then he's hanging out with Klaus. Okay, he's hanging out with Klaus, and he talks about it. For an hour, Klaus, who sadly died in 2014, generously escorted me around the site. I took photos of him and the stones and the workers. This was not a hassle, as there were literally no other tourists. A couple of photos I snatched to show some pictures with Klaus crouching in front of some ancient, some of the stuff here. After the tour, Klaus and I retired from the heat to his tent, where over dainty tulip glasses of sweet black Turkish tea, Klaus explained the significance of the site. As he puts it, quote, Gobekli Tepe upends our view of human history. We always thought that agriculture came first, then civilization, farming, pottery, social hierarchies. But here it is reversed. It seems the ritual center came first. Then when enough hunter-gathering people collected to worship, or so I believe, they realized they had to feed people, which means farming. He waved at the surrounding hills. Quote, it is no coincidence that in these small hills in the Fertile Crescent, men and women first domesticated the local wild einkorn grass, becoming wheat, and they also first domesticated pigs, cows, and sheep. This is the place where Homo sapiens went from plucking the fruit from the tree to toiling and sowing the ground. Klaus had queued me up. People were already speculating that if you see the Garden of Eden mythos as an allegory of the Neolithic Revolution, i.e. our fall from the relative ease of hunter-gatherer to the relative hardship of farming, and life did not get harder when we first started farming, as we worked longer hours and caught diseases from domesticated animals, then Gobekli Tepe and its environs is probably the place where this happened. Klaus Schmidt did not demur. He said to me quite deliberately, I believe Gobekli Tepe is a temple in Eden. It's a quote I reused to some controversy because people took Klaus literally. But he did not mean it literally, he meant it allegorically. Klaus told me more astonishing things. We have found no homes, no human remains. Where is everyone? Did they gather for festivals, then disperse? As for their religion, I have no real idea. Perhaps Gobekli Tepe was a place of excarnation for exposing the bones of the dead to be consumed by vultures. So the bodies have all gone. But I do definitely know this. Sometime in 8000 BC, the creators of Gobekli Tepe buried their great structures under tons of rubble. They entombed it. We can speculate why. Did they feel guilty? Did they need to propitiate an angry god? Or just want to hide it? Klaus was also fairly sure on one other thing. Gobekli Tepe is unique. Okay, so it goes on. There's one more part here, and that is the kicker. Let me get to it. I know it's a long article.
I'm in it.
Another unnerving oddity is the curious number of carvings which show people with 6 fingers. Is this
unnerving?
Yeah, I like their speculation too. Is this symbolic or an actual deformity? Perhaps the mark of a strange tribe? Again, there are more questions than answers. Crucially, however, we do now have tentative hints as to the actual religion of the people. In Gobekli Tepe, there are several skulls that have been recovered. They're deliberately defleshed and carefully pierced with holes so they could supposedly be hung and displayed. Skull cults are not unknown in ancient Anatolia. You got something you want to chime in?
No. It's just, wow, the ancient peoples were so creative.
Yeah, if there was such a cult in the Tezcatlipoca, it might explain the graven vultures pictured playing with human heads. As to how the skulls were obtained, they might have come from conflict. Though there's no evidence of this yet, it is quite possible the skulls were obtained via human sacrifice.
And skulls can come from anywhere, really. Why are you asking so many questions about where the skulls came from?
At a nearby, slightly younger site, the skull building of Kayanu, we know of altars drenched in human blood, probably from gory sacrifice. Probably.
No problemo. Probably. They got 6 fingers. Somebody's gonna get sacrificed if you got a tribe full of 6 fingers.
So it goes on and talks about some more stuff being buried under the sand in that Turkey in that region. And then it just quotes Klaus Schmidt has been proved absolutely right after he first proposed that Gobekli Tepe was deliberately buried with rubble, that is to say, bizarrely entombed by its own creators. A backlash of skepticism grew, with some suggesting that an apparent backfill was merely the result of thousands of years of random erosion, rain, and rivers washing debris between megaliths, gradually hiding them. Why should any religious society bury its own cathedrals, which must have taken decades to construct? And yet, Karahan, too, is definitely and purposely buried. That is the reason Nekmai and his team were able to unearth the phallic pillars so quickly. They all had all they had to do was scoop away the backfill, expose the pillars, sculpted from living rock.
Love it. Okay.
So, goes on and on and on. That's okay. So there's lots of elements. I'm sorry, the bell. Lots of elements to this. So let me take you down the rabbit trail with all this. Obviously, the six fingers.
Okay. Yeah, I thought we were in there. So yeah.
No,
okay. No. Now we're going.
Let me just explain what we're seeing here. Then. Okay. So we have Klaus Schmidt. He's the archaeologist. He's German, and let's see. Was a German archaeologist and prehistorian. And what was it that I found here that was interesting about his work? I'm
a pro-historian. I tell history of the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This guy's not that. He's supposed to be the other way.
It's the other.
Let's see. I can't find what it was. Okay. Well, anyway, let's see where my logic takes me, because obviously I did not go over my notes properly before I did this. I thought I had it all ready to go.
No.
Orientation in German Archaeological Institute. Schmidt purchased a house nearby.
Got 6 fingers.
I don't think he's got 6 fingers, but yeah. Well, first off, what is up with all these people named Klaus? Doing all this stuff.
Lots of Klauses. Lots of Klaus. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. Because he's German, or was. He passed away. He was German. I wonder if this is kind of like a Nazi man. Yeah. Doing
Nazi
the excavations,
paperclip man.
Well, I mean, he would know sort of the hidden.
We all saw Indiana Jones. Okay, we know the Nazis are out looking for these giant phallic sculptures to use them to win the war,
right?
And that they didn't find enough of them, apparently.
Right. Well, so there's some Bible passages about not making graven images, and there's ones about covenants and not making graven images. And perhaps that has something to do with the structures at Gobekli Tepe. You know what I'm saying? Like the covenant of the covenant. Circumcision.
Yeah.
I think there might be a connection there, but
I think so.
Nothing we need to dig into too hard here. But
well, I mean, if someone was going to make the argument that these are phallic structures, they seem to be phallic structures that had, I don't know, some understanding of the covenant.
Yeah, some spiritual significance, and perhaps it was, I don't know, pushing back against it. Who knows? But there's something more interesting, and this is the location of Gobekli Tepe. And I was jumped on Google Maps, and I was taking a look, and the Crescent Valley, the cradle of civilization it covers over Turkey and Armenia and that whole region in the Middle East. And Gobekli Tepe is actually right above Syria, above the border of Syria, and it sits next to the Euphrates River. And you have a dam up here, and there's a lot of interesting things going on. And so there's some Bible passages from the book of Revelation that are interesting to consider here. The first one that I want to mention is from Revelation chapter 9. Starting in verse 16, then the 6th angel sounded his trumpet, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the 6th angel with the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So there are 4 angels bound in the great river, or near the great river Euphrates, or bound at the great river Euphrates. And this article is talking about a buried civilization, like the first civilization, buried in the sands and purposefully buried. It just so happens to be very close. I'm talking, 30, 40 miles to the Euphrates River. And also it sits kind of, I think it's where the Tigris used to be, because, some of those rivers are dried up.
Yeah.
But it's where those 4 rivers kind of all converge, I think, or partially converge anyway. At least the Euphrates is there. So I just thought that was very interesting. In Revelation 16, verse 12, the 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare for the way for the kings from the east. Oh, sorry. I'm doing this out of order a little bit, but back to verse 9 here. Or I'm sorry, chapter 9, continuing on here, verse 15. So the 4 angels who had been prepared for this hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind.
Ooh.
And the number of mounted troops was 200 million. I heard their numbers. So this is some end time stuff going on where something gets unleashed from the river Euphrates, 4 angels, and they're allowed to kill a third of mankind.
That's why you never let the Nazis look for statues. You keep them away from all the statues. I don't care what shape they're in. You got to they belong in a museum, and don't let the Nazis get close to them. You hear me? You hear me?
And obviously, and we mentioned it, the connection is the 6 fingers being represented, and this author not knowing what it might be. 1 Chronicles 20, verse 6, and there was, again, war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he was also descended from the giants. And so I believe that we are, be careful there, excavators over there at Gobekli Tepe. You might be helping out these angels that are bound to eventually be released. Or maybe, I don't know, if you're more of like a metaphorical guy or gal, then it's already been released, and that's why the world is so crazy. And, they're just waiting for the full army of the 2 million to
and they may
emerge.
not be statues. Whatever big appendages you find reaching out from the stones, be careful, because they might just awaken.
I remember the Klaus Schmidt connection.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. X-Men. Are you familiar with the X-Men movies?
Aware of the franchise, yes.
In the movie X-Men First Class and X-Men First Class The High Hand, Kevin Bacon portrays a character named Sebastian Shaw. Sebastian Shaw was a mutant supremacist with the ability to absorb raw energy and redirect it or augment himself.
Oh.
And biography, in 1944, Sebastian Shaw, under the alias Dr. Klaus Schmidt, was a scientist working for the Nazis.
There it is, folks. We always get there. I don't care how long it takes, how many times we need to refer to body parts that make me uncomfortable on the air. I don't care. We always get there, folks, and that's why you keep coming back to Canary Cry NewsTalk.
Sorry, that wasn't as smooth as I was hoping, but we got there.
And you'll continue coming back. You're going to come on back on Wednesday.